Alright, I'm going to start off by showing the result of what I did here. So if we press play, we're in a menu scene. There's a start new game button, and there's a list here in a scroll. In our canvas, it's a scroll view of our buttons for the various saved games we already created. Now we can click here and close that if we want. We could delete the game and we'll remove it from this list. That's 426. Delete the game, delete. It removes it from this list. We have a master list that controls all the that remembers all the saved games, and then we can also start a new game. And that'll populate everything. We start on the correct time with our health 100 0. Excuse me. We can now move around, and then when we want to, we can just hit the save button right here. The load doesn't do anything. That was there for the last test, and it's no longer working. But the save does. It was something a little bit before 8:10. We can stop that, start again. Our new game is here on the bottom. We'll press that to 8:06 a.m. Eventually this would be a screenshot. When you save the game, I would want to save a screenshot of what you're looking at, and then that would be displayed here to help the user remember what saved game is what, and continue the journey. And here we are right where we left off. So you can save as many games as you want now, pretty much, which is pretty cool. So let me go through what we do. I cleaned up a lot of the code, and as I go forward, I'm going to have to clean up even more. It's getting a little bit more complicated now that we're getting into some more scripts and more functionality. One thing is I did move these public classes into one script called classes to keep them all in the same spot. I'm using 3 right now. One is for player data. That's keeping the game time, the level data, and player data. This is probably going to have to end up moving to a dictionary or something, since there's going to be 4 player characters, some NPC characters, some hirelings you can take on, and tons of stats and all that. So I'm going to have to figure out a better way of doing that rather than just a list here. Master saved games. This class, I use this to save and load the saved games. It just keeps a count of how many games there are and the name of the games. Right now the name of the game is random, but users will be able to choose their own names in the future as long as they're unique. And then the scene data. This is for each scene has its own scene data. It's got its name. These are the start position for the player, X, Y, Z. The start rotation of the player on the Y-axis, and the start rotation of the camera on the X-axis. So those are things that each scene needs to have for the default. So in our scene here, you're going to have to go through, if you're really interested in all this, you're going to have to go through it yourself because there's too much to explain in terrible detail. But on the start new game here, it just goes through our menu controller, which is controlling almost everything in on this scene. So let's go to our main menu control. We've got a bunch of functions here. On start, we load the master saved games into our variable here, and we display our games. Displaying the games is pretty straightforward. Right here, it's right at the top. If we have games, then for each game it will bring one of the button prefabs, it's just a UI button, into the scene and parent it underneath the container, and also change the text to be the name of the game. That's all it does. The Unity does the rest with, I believe I used a content. Inside there's a content size fitter and a grid layout group. Those are 2 things I had to add to make that work. And otherwise it's just a generic scroll view that was just added from the component menu or from the create menu. So that was pretty easy. Start new game, which is what happened. The function that's called when you press the start new game button, is in this temporary menu temp control script. Eventually, that button will actually lead you to a character creation scene. So nothing actually gets saved until you finish that process. So for now, I don't want to set that up quite yet. So this just basically creates a scene with the basic stuff saved already for you. So it chooses a random name, random, then just a random number, a little callback there. Then it goes to the new game setup object and just says setup new game with the new name. Now, new game setup object is right here, another temporary thing. So it finds the menu controller, it sets the selected game name to the new one. That way the menu controller will load a game based on the selected game name, so that needs to be there. First we add this game name to the master game list file, and this save control now has actually more functions on it. So we pass in the game name and set some new variables. Now, there's two options here. One, if the player's never played before, there's not going to be this file. And so we're going to search first to see if this file exists. The file is called master save games. And if the file exists, then we're going to grab the data and add our new, and populate these two variables with that data that already exists. Now, if we want to add the new games to the top of the list, which is probably something that I think would be appropriate, that's an important thing for this next step, where we add this thing. If the game count is not 0, then we add a comma. So instead of doing like this, we could reverse that, add the new string, then the comma, and then the rest. But at this point, it just puts it on the end, adds a new game count plus 1. If this didn't happen, then this would just be one name without a comma and 1, and then we save the file right here. This is pretty much the same code throughout the save and load, just with slightly different variations. And then we close the file, and that is that for that step. Eventually we're going to have to replace this, but right now we're saving the game data. Saving the game data, this would happen theoretically with all the player stuff that we create with the character creation scene. But for now, we're just going to save the file. It's going to be called GameName.data or .dat. And the data is going to be of the format player data, which in our classes has these things. And we're going to start the health at 100, experience at 0, and this is the date and time, and the first scene, which is test scene 1. We save that, close the file, do a callback. Next, we simply call play game. You can ignore this stuff. We'll delete that now. Call play game on the main menu controller. Play game is something that we're going to keep because we use it to load saved games as well. Play game basically takes the it sets a game info. Game info is a object that doesn't get destroyed. It's just got one static variable game name, and it doesn't destroy on load. I'm pretty sure I can just remove that, but just in case I want to pass more information, not in static variables, from the menu screen to the game scene, I might keep this around. It saves the game name in a method that's not player prefs. I want to avoid using player prefs. I could just save that to a player pref, but I want to avoid that for this project. Next, we populate the stack of variables in time control and player control with the data from this load player data. Now this is something that I started doing. I think this is the more proper way of using these static functions. Save control load player data right here, just right here. It basically returns a player data format of all the stuff. It does two things. Again, it looks for the file. If the file exists, then it takes the data from the file. Now this is really a debug stuff. If the file doesn't exist, if for some reason we're trying to load a game that has no data file, it's going to delete it from the master list. This is a debug thing. Earlier in the development, I was having issues where some of them didn't delete from the master list, so they were still being shown. So this is probably something that can be deleted. For now, I'm going to leave it in just in case I have any issues. So you can ignore that. So we populate that data, and then we simply do scene manager load scene to the data scene name. And then let's go ahead and actually start that process. So we'll do that, and then we'll right here new level was load. This is in the master file. You'll notice I have the control objects now includes the canvas. This is a prefab that's going to be in every scene. Similar to the other one, there will only ever be one in the game. Every scene will have it, but this will be the only one that just holds over from scene to scene, and the canvas is included in that. And so on master control, we have a link to all these different panels just in case. Most of them could probably be taken away later, but I have it just in case. And we've set this up. I want to thank people in the forums, and probably Eric 5H5 or Eric basically in the forums, as I'm sure many of you have noticed. He has amazing answers. So this allows me to call these variables without using a get component or game object defined or get component by just simply calling master.control with the parentheses dot any of these variables. So on level was loaded. This happens at the beginning of any level being loaded. The scene name will be taken, and we will find the scene controller with the game object.find. I might be able to find a better way of doing this that doesn't use game object.find, but only one use shouldn't be a problem. And then the scene controller we call the load function. Now the scene controllers are all under here. This is of course our control objects. There will be one of these for every scene. It will have the scene data, probably have more information as well in the end. But one of the functions is this load function here, and it loads all the scene data that we need to load. At this point, it just first it finds if the file exists, the scene file, which is going to be the game name underscore scene name. If it doesn't exist, then we create one by saving a scene data. We do basically as if we're saving the game at the beginning of the game. It saves a player position in the default position and all that. We have two options here: force position and entrance object. Those are going to be for later when we have entrance objects that trigger the character to go between scenes. Oftentimes, if you have an entrance from, say, a castle to a dungeon, if the ladder goes down, you want the player to start at the same position, the base of that ladder every single time. Perhaps there will be multiple entrances to the dungeon, so the entrance object will carry a position for the destination. And if that's the case, then we're going to force position by taking that entrance object. This is going to be for the next step, which I started working on it, but it's not complete yet. If this is false, which it is in this case, then we simply save the current position of the players. And this is the use of that master.control in parentheses .player object transform position XYZ, etc. So we save that file, and that creates the file for the first time. Now if the file already exists, which means that we've already played the scene, then it's going to load the data, close the file, and then put the player in his place. So took the position to be the XYZ from that saved position, and the rotations as well. And that's pretty much it. Once it's loaded, everything just works. The loading a game works the exact same way pretty much. Whoops, see, that was one of those errors. I need to figure out that bug. There's definitely a bug somewhere in there. So the way this works is continue your journey simply calls play game. There we go. It calls play game just like loading it. The main menu controller already knows what scene is selected game name, which is right there, and it will call up and play that game when we click continue the journey. So that's pretty much it. Deleting the game, we went through that. Yeah, I think that's it. So this is a little more complicated. It's definitely more code heavy. It's newer code for me. Using all these classes and stuff is actually something I've never really done before. I really like it, and I feel kind of like an idiot that I've never done it before, but hey, it's working out really well for me now. So enjoy. Let me know what you think.